I just want to build tools that help patients. People are happy when they feel they're contributing at their maximum potential. Building a device that is easy will make retinal imaging ubiquitous so we can really unleash the power of the information in the retina. And we are starting to build screening products with AI, screening and eventually monitoring, etc. We are starting with diabetic retinopathy because that's a huge problem. I just want to solve problems in this space.
Hey everybody, this week I am joined by Vicky Demas, and she's the CEO of identifeye Health. Vicky's got more than 20 years of experience developing, launching healthcare products, joined identifeye Health after leading the development of new products for GRAIL, which was a cancer screening company. So now she's at identifeye Health, which aims to harness health insights from the human eye to promote overall health and well-being using automation and advanced AI. Vicky, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. How are you doing?
Hi, James. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
You are very welcome. Whereabouts are you speaking to us from today, Vicky?
Today, I'm actually speaking to you from New York. That's not where I usually am based, but yes, I move around quite a bit.
Very nice. What are you up to in New York?
Meeting with investors.
Of course. Always be raising as a founder, hey?
Yes.
So listen, Vicky, absolute pleasure to have you on. What your company's doing sounds awesome. It sounds super exciting. There is so much that we can learn about the human body from looking at the back of the eye, which I actually don't think the layperson knows and understands. So I'm quite excited to geek out on some of this with you. But before we get into talking about identifeye Health, it would be great to hear more about your story and your background, everything that you've done, obviously cancer screening and engineering and all the stuff that you've done with startups. So it'd be great if you could kick off by telling us a bit of your story.
Great. Yes, of course. Happy to share. First, I'll start with something very trivial, which is, I was born in Chicago, and this very subtle accent. Sometimes people...
I heard it when you said Chicago, yeah.
But the accent is not Chicagoan. I actually grew up in Greece and moved back to the United States when it was time for college. And part of the reason for that was that my super supportive parents kind of made me. But what they did say is that I can go to any university I wanted and I can study anything I wanted as long as it was in Illinois. Yes. So I wanted to be an engineer. So I went to UIUC for undergraduate. And then after that, I went for my PhD. And sometimes I like to tell people that, the true reason why I went to get my PhD was because I wanted to apply to the astronaut program and be a mission specialist. And that was one of the requirements. So
Interesting.
Yes. It is interesting. It was very interesting when I was sharing this with my classmates at the time. They were like, and then, we were expecting to say, like, you also wanted to be a ballerina, but then you never really grew up from the wanting to be an astronaut and a ballerina. But no, but true story.
Someone's got to be an astronaut, though. Like, why not? Why not be ambitious and aim for it, hey? Like, what do they say? Aim for the moon and you might miss and hit the stars. Like, you might as well aim high.
Yes. No, but it was space exploration. I was fascinated as a kid, and I got to visit the Kennedy Space Center when I was 11. Had come to the U.S. with my family for a visit, so that was a little bit. It stayed on for quite a bit. Anyway, so I went to Berkeley for my PhD, and there I studied as a chemical engineer, physical chemist. And started to do research in portable magnetic resonance, fascinating technology, trying to figure out how to democratize access, how to make it easier to work with smaller permanent magnets and deal with all of the the issues that come along with that.
Quick question on that. How portable? How portable is portable when you talk about portable MR?
For us at the time, it was something that you could bring to the bedside, something that can actually be rolled next to a patient. Think of ambulatory settings, something that in principle you could detect a stroke or be able to better understand, is it an ischemic stroke? Like, how do we treat? How do we proceed?
Okay, so before we go on, this is already fascinating. So obviously my background is in clinical medicine and in anesthetics and intensive care, right? So, part of your job as an anaesthetist when you're covering ITU is to take patients down to the scanner. And when you've got, sedated patients that are, having multiple organs helped by intensive care, that comes with a lot of equipment, that comes with a lot of hassle, that comes with a lot of risk. Transferring them from the bed to the scanner comes with a lot of those. It's fraught with issues. And so, portable MRIs that can go to the bedside, that's fascinating. How far are we from that technology reaching us, do you think?
This is obviously, and I'll say I cannot not take any credit for this particular company, but it is a company affiliated with for Catalyzer called Hyperfine, that they actually have a portable, as in you can wheel down the hallway of a hospital and bring it to the bedside. And that has gotten clearance and it's actually in use. So it's exciting, having left the space about 20 some years ago, to actually see it continuing to progress.
Interesting. Fascinating. Anyway, I interrupted you. That's not what you're up to. That's what you were up to. But by all means, carry on. I might have another strange question to ask you on that later when I thought about it. But no, you carry on with your story.
James, listen, actually, sometimes I tell people that one of the reasons I got fascinated as a kid with engineering was one, there were a few, was my love of magnets. I found them magical. Yes.
Yeah. And then creating an image from a magnet must be even more magical, right? I actually had to learn how that worked. I've already forgotten it, but I'm sure it was fascinating at the time.
Yes. No, it was for sure fascinating. But in general, I think one of the reasons I loved engineering as a kid was because you could build really cool things. And you would see components that were completely, as I said, kind of boring on their own, except for magnets. But then you assembled them and built a function. And that was super cool. I got to do that. My dad was an engineer, so he was quite a bit of that early on inspiration. So back now to the path. Now I'm getting my PhD, portable magnetic resonance. I worked in the national labs for a little bit. And an opportunity came along to actually join a startup that was looking to leverage magnetic resonance to build a new platform, a diagnostic platform for infectious disease, actually. So I took a step in that direction to say, let's give it a try and see. I had spoken with a lot of people in my kind of just sphere, and they said, you either love startups or you don't. You won't until you try. So felt like the right time to try. And I joined this tiny startup. We ended up building a pretty amazing platform. We were able to build our first test, was a test to really help detect whether a patient that appears to have, some type of infection, is that a bacterial infection or is that a fungal infection? We leveraged this platform. Obviously, the platform could do a series of tests later on, but the first test was a Candida test. And again, it was a very small population that gets impacted. But because of that, the treatments also were not necessarily, or how you triage a patient was really focused on bacterial infections, right? So someone appears to have high fever, you think they're having an infection, all of the rest of it makes sense. You will treat them with a broad spectrum antibiotic. And by the time blood culture results would come back, the patient will have become septic and died. And I remember when we were running our pivotal studies, that first patient that results came back and our results would come back in 2 hours, that we were able to diagnose and they got treated. And that was the moment that I realized that, okay, I have found my calling. So yes, I love my magnets. I love everything, but no, I just want to build tools that help patients.
Interesting.
So after that, and that company was called T2 Biosystems, I got a cold call from Google.
Nice.
Yes.
That's one you answer, yeah.
Yes, you answer. Believe it or not, it took me a few missed calls to answer because I was very confused.
Playing hard to get, like it. Yeah, keep them keen, yeah. It's nice.
And I was like, I would never hire me to be a computer scientist. Definitely not at the level of what like Google would want. I'm like, I don't know what they want from me. So at some point they're like, no, it's Google X. Then I Googled Google X. And I found things like the space elevator. It was really back in 2012, 2013.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah. So nonetheless, I did pick up the phone. We got to arrange for an interview. It was a slightly surreal experience because they didn't tell me what they were interviewing me for.
Only Google has the audacity to take your time, your precious time. And to be fair, they can, because we will give them that time, because Google X sounds really fucking cool, doesn't it? So.
It does. They do give you also really nice gifts, actually, for even just visiting and having an interview. So at least they did at the time, yeah. But what made it even more obnoxious was they wouldn't tell me who I was meeting for my interviews. Amazing. Oh, incredible. It was, they were trying to start life sciences, but it was all very secretive at the time. So they didn't want you to be able to look up these people and see whether they had worked in the medical device space, for example, life sciences, healthcare.
Sure.
So I did go for the interview. I met those wonderful people whose names I only knew the first name and the first letter of their last name. So at the end, I did end up getting a job offer, but they wanted me to meet the head of the group, whose name was Andy C. So Andy was super nice and comes and says, "Listen, tell me what you need to know. What can I say to make you excited about this job if you're not already?" I said, "Please tell me whether C stands for Conrad," because I had read an article, around that same time, something about Google Ventures, mentioning Andy Conrad, who I knew was a big health tech guy. And Andy started laughing, and he's like, "Yes." I was like, "Okay."
Oh, interesting. Yes. Very nice.
Yeah, I was like, I don't care what I will be working on as long as it is in healthcare, life sciences. Like, that's like, I will work on any tech, whatever it is. I just want to solve problems in this space. So. Wow.
What a great question to end an interview as well, that just showed even more value.
Yes. Then I made it to Google, and was part of the team that ended up building the life sciences initiative that became Google Life Sciences, spun out fully and rebranded when the Alphabet restructure happened.
Yeah.
And was rebranded to Verily. And then, So a lot of sort of what Google was trying to do, and it's very appropriate for today's conversations, like in general in the space. Obviously, Google changed the way we access information in the world and the way we think of the world today. And they had built a ton of tools and infrastructure to do that, to organize the world's data, information, et cetera, and make it accessible. So they wanted to apply it to problems worth solving outside of their core business. And that was really what Google X was about. And in our particular case was leveraging this AI tools to really improve, I'll just say, problems in healthcare and life sciences. So we got to have a ton of fun, built incredible teams and programs and joint ventures, working, again, like hiring incredible people, and working with leading, kind of industry companies, etc. So super fun.
What's a tangible example of a project that you worked on, like of like a thing that you created there?
Sure. I'll give a couple, and not everything, went public, and I kept tabs on things like after I left. But
yes, it's Google X. We're aware of the secrecy. Yes. The space elevator, etc. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So some of the things would be a joint venture with J&J called Verb Surgical, where the idea was to use AI to do a ton of things. For example, anything from taking preoperative imaging to support surgical guidance, to all of the fancy things like you might think about more on the image analytics side of, segmentation, et cetera. Imagine like being able to ensure that you have guidance to support visualizing nerves from vasculature and other things. So it was a super exciting project, and Verb ended up getting bought back by J&J later on. Another really cool and very relevant to what I'm doing today, what we're doing at identifeye, was the collaboration between Google, Verily, and the Nikon Optos, specifically trying to leverage AI for retinal imaging, and try to democratize access to things like diabetic retinopathy screening. Interesting.
So obviously that heavily influencing you, and obviously a project that you enjoyed working on, given what you're up to now.
For sure. Yeah.
So what came next after Google?
So after Google, and it was a little bit of my mentor at Google, or one of my mentors at Google, Jeff Huber, who's an amazing human, for personal reasons had left, a very sad personal loss to cancer. And I had stayed in touch with Jeff after he came back, or he reappeared. He had started a company called GRAIL, and that was an Illumina spin-out. And we were chatting with Jeff, and Jeff is a very professional. Like, he would not come and say, hey, like, you should leave your job. But he would say, hey, oh my gosh, like, you could help us so much with so many things, but I hope this is. So, and I remember at the time thinking, okay, so we've set up amazing programs at Google. I have built incredible teams, and I was very, very proud of the teams that I had built. And I thought that if I left, I knew what was going to be happening in my old teams for the next at least year or so. I know they have funding. I know they have, amazing goals. And it would be an opportunity for my technical leads to step up and grow and grow their own careers. So I thought it would be the perfect timing for me to actually go and try to help a new team and be part of that new
really
team
nice, yeah.
and learn. Yeah. So I followed, or I joined GRAIL, and it was really exciting because also who was my manager at Google for a good amount of time had joined as the chief scientific officer, Vic Bajaj. And then one of my favorite colleagues who was running clinical in the earlier days of Google had joined to help set up the clinical team. So I knew the team. I was very excited about joining
dream
them.
Team that's come together that enjoys working together. I mean, that's de-risking quite a lot at the early stage of a startup if you can manage that, like highly talented people that actually enjoy working together. I mean, then on a problem that they actually care about as well, like you've basically got the perfect start, haven't you?
Yes, exactly. I think you got it right. Having the right problem and the right team, I think, is just a recipe for amazing things to happen.
Yeah. Do you know what? I actually think, like, on a serious note, I think chemistry between early members of a team is probably something that's actually quite underrated, actually. I think it's probably something that people sort of get lucky with, perhaps, rather than like there's no, I don't feel like there's a massive framework for really planning around that. But people talk about hiring talent, don't they? They talk, can you attract talent? Can you hire talent? And I don't know how much. It might be very different in your experience, in your case, and I hope it is in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's not talked about as much, the chemistry and the enjoyment side of perhaps that early team, like mechanics. I don't know.
James, no, I mean, I think I agree with you in how important it is. And I will agree with you that people don't necessarily, there is no recipe that people will tell you they follow to actually work on the chemistry. At identifeye, we got super lucky in the following sense. Because I came in and pretty early on, I thought that, like culture is so important. I think it's more than just chemistry. Is if you can recruit, so you recruit for talent, but you also recruit for someone who fits into the culture you believe is the right culture for a team. So I've been fortunate that I got to sort of say, what do I think are some of the most important things to actually having a team? And part of the reason I came to at least like this attempt was I have worked in a ton of places early on where the chemistry or the values are not aligned, and it can be less than ideal, I would say.
Yeah, and actually, you just said it there. The link between those two words is incredibly important. I think chemistry and values, because there's a bit of discourse around hiring for culture fit is perhaps seen as like, there's a little bit of like, are you just trying to bring people in that are like other people? Do you get the same diversity of thought, this, that, and the other? But I think how you just phrased it, of where you align chemistry to shared values, I think that's really important, because you can interview for that. You can interview for someone's values. You can ask certain questions that allow someone the opportunity to explain times where they have exhibited certain values, or they can tell a story and you can interpret the values from their behaviors, and you can basically hire for values fit, which I think is what people are trying to get at with culture fit, because you still want the diversity of thought. And of course you can still have huge diversity, but among 3 or 4 shared values, that now turns into massive superpower, because if you get the diversity and the shared values, then you're away. Is my perception of it anyway. It's just incredibly difficult to do practically, especially when you're then trying to, in my game, try and hire specifically for health tech, biotechnology, and specifically marketing, and specifically some skills. So you actually, the pool of people gets smaller and smaller, as I'm sure it is in your game too.
For sure. I think, but I go back, for me, I feel building the right team is just so important that it's worth that extra effort, and right to really kind of just find the right person that will add value to the team. It's more, right, like a good team is more than the sum of its parts. And actually, I've seen so many times teams that are so inefficient that you see, but I see individually amazing people, and somehow the output overall as the team is just not there. So I think we've gotten it. I'm very happy with my team now. So this is, but in general, I'll tell you that I have been again. I won't say lucky. I have been very intentional about team building, and I'm very proud of the teams that I've managed to build in the past. identifeye is just really cool that I get to build the entire team, obviously, and then with my team build, like, right? But this is, yeah. Great.
So I interrupted you. Actually, you were talking about GRAIL, and you were talking about the team, the dream team coming together for GRAIL, and obviously you learning that and bringing it forwards into identifeye. So perhaps if there was anything else you learned at GRAIL, or whether you want to talk about the beginning of identifeye after that.
Sure. So at GRAIL, we did do something also pretty incredible. The idea was now again leveraging the power of AI to build a new cancer diagnostic. And the really big part, obviously, to drive this kind of innovation is you need a lot of good quality data. So GRAIL did this massive sets of population scale studies. I mean, our foundational study was 10,000 participants followed over years. Just these are different cancer cohorts, different stages of disease, all the workups you can imagine throughout. So got to see a little bit on how you actually build, the whole biomarker discovery space specifically for disease screening. Also, a lot of other lessons learned in terms of, it's more than building a product that helps patients. Like, you also have to figure out a way to build a product that creates value for health systems, clinicians. And maybe we could have done a little bit better, because coming up with a test that you will have to build utility over the course of years, it will take a long time to get Gallery, which again, like, Gallery is a test I'm so proud of the team that we actually pulled this together. And I do think that it's going to change how we think of cancer in the future, because eventually should be, you do your annual screening, blood works, etc. You also have the Gallery test, and you establish your baseline, if there's something to worry about. But currently that's a $950 out-of-pocket test. Obviously there are some employers, etc., that cover that as a benefit. But it will take time for the test to get reimbursement, etc. So I think I've learned a lot of things that I'm just really excited, because I feel it's almost like all of the mistakes I made, mistakes I got to see and experience now are setting us up in a place that I just am truly, truly excited to apply and make sure that we do this right at identifeye.
I love that. I love the genuine excitement and passion that you're clearly showing there. And actually, a question that I ask a lot on this podcast is, how did you gain the confidence to run your own startup? And different people that have gone different ways into entrepreneurship will answer that differently. I think your way into it is actually, it's actually one of the more straightforward answers to, like, how did you gain the confidence? It's because you experienced it, and you experienced it very close to the founders, and you experienced, you said it, you making mistakes, watching others making mistakes, seeing what went well, like analyzing what you did well, analyzing what others did well, seeing team structure, seeing hiring, seeing these early chemistry and culture fit mistakes and good things. And I think when you do jump from a few startups and you manage to, either rise the ladder to go close to the founders, or even just to be in early stage stuff that by definition you're only one of 10 or one of 20 and you are close to those people. I think the closer you can get, the better, because you're quite right. Like, it doesn't take long before someone that's clearly smart and academic and can, understand concepts to see that for what it is, and then think, I mean, you'll probably this probably will resonate, that towards the end of that journey, you're starting to think, well, if I was in that situation, I might have done this, or I perhaps want to try it this way, and then the desire and the want to do it, I guess, becomes quite compelling, and you end up looking for ways to do your own thing once the idea hits. So tell me about that part of your journey then. So tell me about how did you get the idea, and then how did you go from sort of 0 to 1? How did you go from an idea to reality?
The story is a little different than that. And I'll say one thing is, first of all, I never went about saying, I should be a CEO, a startup CEO. That never crossed my mind, which it is interesting the more I think about it from where I am today. I always cared about making an impact. I call it like the sort of like fulfilling your potential. People are happy when they feel they're contributing at their maximum potential, or at least some people. And if anything, in the past, like, I might have thought about, oh man, we could do this better. Like, we could have finished this if only I had been able to convince, somebody or something, right? That's a little bit how I thought about it. What happened in the particular case, and actually it was about a little bit over 3 years ago, because today is my formal 3-year anniversary at identifeye.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So it was April of 2021. Jonathan Rothberg, he is the founder of 4Catalyzer, and he had started a series of companies through that, including the company I mentioned, Hyperfine, on the portable MRI, or the wheelable MRI. he reached out to me and he sent a cryptic email. That's like, you see, there is a little bit of a pattern in my life.
Yeah, you get headhunted a lot. That's something that you could teach, by the way. If all goes wrong, you should put an online course out, like how to get headhunted by the best people on earth.
So Jonathan Rothberg sent me a very cryptic email saying, hey, I heard your name from a couple of people I work closely with that I really trust. I'd love to connect. Do you have time this weekend? I knew who Jonathan Rothberg was. So I was like, okay, yes, of course. I have time. And we were supposed to chat for half an hour. We ended up chatting for a couple hours about a lot of different things. And at the end, he says he wanted to speak to me about a company he had just gotten funded. And the company was called Tesseract at the time.
Sorry to interrupt to say. So the Jonathan Rothberg, this is the semiconductor guy, isn't it? This is the guy that's Butterfly IQ.
Mm-hmm. That is
okay. Wow. He reached out to you personally.
He reached out to me personally, yes.
Okay, that's definitely a phone call you take. Okay. I know where we are now. I'm orientated in the gravity of the situation now, so please do continue.
So I had
if you Google him, by the way, there's like photos of like him with Obama and him with like, so like, yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
exactly.
fine.
You cannot be in our space and not know who he is. So
indeed.
Right.
I did Google it when you said it. Cause I was like, I literally searched it as you were talking. Cause I was like, does she mean this guy? Like, am I thinking all right? Yeah. Nice. Very nice.
We had a lovely chat. And at the end of it, he says, wait a minute, especially because like the portable MRI, et cetera. By the way, some of the people that had spoken to me, he actually shared who were the people that gave him my name. It was, former CEO of Hyperfine who was trying to bring me into the network. He wanted me to help him with Hyperfine, which I get asked a lot, like, how come, like, you didn't? Yeah. So, okay. So he had spoken to him about me. Also one of his, I believe he was the chief technology officer of one of his other startups that I was advising, had spoken to him about me. And the investors in, quite a few of his companies, they're alumni, people that I had worked with before, so they had spoken to him about me. So that's a little bit was the context. So now he's like, wait a minute, I thought we were going to talk about one thing. We spoke about 5. You have to be working for me. I was like, well, he's like, how not? How come not? Right? So I was like, yes, I hear you. It would be fun, but I have a job. I have a team. It's not the right time. Yeah. GRAIL was, had attempted to go public at the time, and then Illumina had decided to acquire GRAIL. And we knew that. And I was like, I have to figure out what's happening, the timing. It's not the right time.
Yeah.
But I'm excited about the space because, back to the whole retinal imaging, that is a space I believe, very strongly about. And I said, if there's anything I can do to help, I'd love to at least get to know more about the company, the team, and kind of assess, what I can do to help. And I remember at the time, joining a couple of meetings and listening in and assessing where the company was. And at some point I said, you know what, can I just come for a visit? Because I'd love to see this prototype that the team says they have ready. And actually they didn't call it a prototype at the time. They called it was they were ready for design freeze. And it sounded that it was in a different place. So I said, I'd love to meet them and kind of just check it out. And I connected, so I got to see everyone, and that was an example of, I met some really nice people. I just don't understand why the team isn't where the team needed to be maybe at the time. And the kind of just trying to assess what is the focus, where are we, what is, right? So anyways, it was a very different reincarnation of the company at the time, but at the end of the visit, I had a chat with Jonathan, and I gave him my assessment of what I think is needed to get the team to the next level, to really kind of just be able to push this forward. And after that, he said, well, I'm going to recommend to the board that we bring you on as the CEO. I don't want to do any more of the searching. They were, right? So I was like, I didn't. But anyways, I was starting to get really excited about the potential to come in and do, again, I did feel, and that was probably a very critical piece in my decision, that I can come in and help with a ton of things that I felt super comfortable related to setting the right strategy, figuring out what's the right team to execute on it, building the team, supporting them, helping them grow, while it also bought me the time that I needed to learn some of the things that would be new because I'm taking.
Makes sense.
Yes. So that was kind of the rationale, I guess.
Nice. So what next?
What next? We rebranded Tessort to identifeye. That kind of and the reason for that was Jonathan's vision was Tessort, right? Like I don't know, I'm a geek, so I will tell you, like, right, like it's the fourth dimensional cube, and it's kind of cool, especially if you've been in medical imaging. You're starting to think of, I have 3 dimensions. If I add the time, or if I add, right, like spectroscopic imaging on top of it, like now I see where he was getting with that. That's kind of cool. But for me, the space, and it was incredible because the original thought back at Google was, right, democratizing access, which for me was a lot about the workflow. How do you bring technologies close to the patient, and then obviously extract the right types of information from, medical imaging close to the patient. But the problem there, it was really not addressed as a workflow. It was more, let's take AI, and if you're thinking Nikon and Optos has a beautiful, close to $200,000 piece of equipment. We ended up solving a different problem, focusing on more, if I have images that have come from an instrument, how do we analyze them and give a report, right? The algorithm can classify or can segment, annotate, etc., lesions and anomalies. And having looked at the space in the 7 or so years since we started in the area, everyone had addressed the problem in that very segmented fashion. So there were companies that were trying to make smaller portable hardware, and there were companies that were building software. And we came in and we said, no, we have to really address the workflow. We have to build the whole end-to-end solution, kind of like Macintosh, right? Like rather than Microsoft Office and, right, like, working on someone's computer. So that was a little bit, and part of the reason for rebranding the company, I thought, this isn't about the tech. This is about the problem we're trying to solve, which is really looking in the eye to identify disease, to identify eventually personalized maps to health and wellness. So I wanted, again, like a name that reflects who we are, what we're trying to do, make it descriptive. And then that also meant that we changed the focus of the company to be all about taking a technology that is well understood and make it so easy that anyone can use it. And I say anyone, but obviously we're working with the regulators. This is going to be first marketed to healthcare practitioners. But the idea is that, a medical assistant is able to use it while they're super busy doing 100 other things and not constantly using it so that they are, they can keep the skills that are required to actually do this. So that's kind of where we are, and building a device that is easy will make retinal imaging ubiquitous, so we can really unleash the power of the information in the retina. And we are starting to build screening products with AI, screening and eventually monitoring, etc. We are starting with diabetic retinopathy because that's a huge problem. But now that brings us to where we are today, I guess. Yeah.
Awesome. I have a load of questions. This is fascinating. So, to distill this down, you've built a medical device that images the retina. That's fair.
Yes, that is very fair.
Now, you said, which I thought was fabulous, that there were people building the hardware, There were people building the software. Absolutely nobody built an end-to-end solution. That summarizes so much of what is going on in health tech and has done historically. I think because largely of quite a lot of legacy companies that have always built hardware, that have always built software, and it makes sense that the experts do what they're expert in. And actually, it's one of those tensions, isn't it, between like which software company is going to try and build the hardware, which hardware company is going to try and build the software. But actually, it leaves room in the middle for new startups to come up, like with new and interesting ideas that are not necessarily shackled by the requirements and the old school legacy systems of hardware, or indeed older school processes developing software. So that's a really interesting space. My question, from, I guess, putting almost like an investor hat on here and thinking about this, is like, from a unit economics perspective, everyone wants to build software. Everyone wants the unit economics of software. Everyone wants 90+% gross margins. Everyone wants to build a company on B2B SaaS. So my first question is, when thinking about an end-to-end solution for diabetic retinopathy screening using hardware, why wouldn't you just build the software and use anyone's hardware? Why would you specifically aim to build the hardware as well? Is it because it's something to do with the image you can create being like a certain way for the software? Is it volume? Is it scale? Is it resolution? Is it like what's the advantage of doing the hardware as well when you could build something that might be hardware agnostic from a software point of view?
It's a great question, and a lot of people have followed the path that you just said, which is built the software, received clearances, and kind of just started marketing. The way that it works, it can't necessarily be that the software is hardware agnostic, because by definition, the FDA is requesting companies to make their submissions on, here's my algorithm, and it works with images that we were taking from particular company device X. So it goes back to that workflow problem. The way that it works if you just built the software is still someone has to go and figure out how to get a good image. And it's not necessarily a good image for the purposes of the algorithm, but it's a good quality image, that there isn't fogginess, there are no artifacts, that there, right? So what it means to take a good retinal photo, or what needs to happen, is you have to make sure that you find the patient's pupil. It's like looking through a keyhole and taking a photo of the room. So be in the right space, capture a good photo. A lot of the automation, obviously you will focus, etc., but you have got to find the pupil. You have got to make sure that the patient is looking at the right direction, because even your gauge, there are other things, like a patient might be tired, might be an older patient that is just like relaxing their eyes, and, now they blinked. So you have to have a human sitting there and figuring out how to deal with all of that. And it's almost like, at the end of the day, when you're looking at the image resolution, how many pixels, contrast, etc., that's not really the big problem, right? There are amazing cameras out there, right? Like, in our space today, I mean, look at your phone. Like, I don't know what phone you have, but like, I'm sure it has a pretty spectacular camera on it.
iPhone 13. So I'm looking to upgrade it, actually, with the next one. I'm waiting till September.
So, but you get my point, right? Like, yes. So with us, I felt there wasn't anything out there that actually did that well. So we actually put a lot of energy in leveraging AI to create the level of automation that is needed to guide the image capture. And actually, we have built it in a way that we are running our camera with an app that we have developed that runs on an iPad mini that actually also gives verbal instructions. So it will actually tell you, can you blink now because we're going to have to capture, right? Like, or can you, look at this red dot and try to follow it and stay with it, just to make it very easy. Then also the algorithm itself for diabetic retinopathy screening checks, do I have what I need to actually make a call? If not, I will re-trigger capturing of the image. So you don't need to have, again, like someone sitting there, the someone being the operator of the device, trying to do all of that. So honestly, I think I go back to, it was the only way to address the workflow. And in my mind, that is for sure one of the issues in this space, in trying to bring screening or retinal imaging more broadly closer to the patient.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And actually, there's a lot of similarities there with one of Jonathan's other companies, like Butterfly IQ, with linking it to an iPad and guiding instructions of use, and that actually being, there's a lot of similarities actually there. And that's point of care ultrasound, by the way, for people that are listening that don't know what Butterfly IQ is. Basically like a handheld ultrasound that you can connect to a phone and do at the bedside. So my next question is about, it's more of a comment actually, about the fact that you are reducing the necessity for the higher qualified individuals to basically ensure that this workflow goes from start to finish. So you're sort of changing the model of care. And I think that goes to your democratization point, doesn't it? Like you're getting to a point where you don't need the more expensive people to do certain tasks because of the guidance, because of the ability for the machine to work in the way that it does by helping others to do it. Therefore, where you do have, medical assistants being able to do this, you can decrease the cost of care. It makes sense for people to buy this from when you adopt like a department or a systems view. And I guess that helps when talking about how applicable this is globally as well, right? Because in the more economically well-off world, we can reduce the cost of care, etc. But actually, it's more that from a global perspective, you're enabling so much about access to care and access to this type of care, probably in regions that need it far more than some of the ones that can afford it as well. If that is a fair way of looking at it.
It is, but I think about it a little different. It's more, I never think about it in terms of replacing the highly trained, skilled professional, as much as I think we don't have enough. And there are so many healthcare personnel shortages, right? So even here, what we want to do is we want to make sure that the highly skilled, specialists see the patients that need them, because now even here, even in the United States, where, for people that it just takes you months to actually book that appointment, versus saying, let's make sure that we leverage automation, AI and automation, I'll put it coupled together, to address tasks that we understand as humans. And if anything, maybe in some cases, we know because of the nature of the task and how repetitive some of these things are, et cetera, there is a human error tendency. So let's actually remove that and make sure that our humans have time to actually deal with the bigger problems that AI cannot deal with. And overall create accessibility and et cetera. And then there are the other pieces. But yes, for sure, it's all about, I think, creating access and almost think about, or at least how I think about it is, you're triaging into the doctors, into the system.
Yes.
You're figuring out,
yes.
For example, in the case of diabetic retinopathy, you say, based on disease prevalence in diabetics, you expect maybe 25% of the patients to actually have to go and start getting monitored. What we're trying to do is make sure that they go and the rest of the people can sort of like stay with a screening. Eventually, obviously, we'll go into monitoring, et cetera, et cetera. But that's how I like to think about it. There was one thing that in your previous question that I wanted to address, though, in the business model, if that's okay to jump back for a second. So while I thought it's very important to have our own hardware so that we could bring retinal imaging close to the patients, and make it more accessible, our business model works like the revenue will be coming from the testing and annual subscription to our cloud. The devices are more, think of it like we are working on pricing strategy, et cetera, as we're thinking through that. But the idea is obviously that we really want to make sure that the device gets used, and
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Scanning the retina of someone, you can learn a lot from that. You can learn more, I think, than probably quite a lot of people listening realize. Whilst you're starting with diabetic retinopathy, I imagine that is just the start. What, if you can say, what else, even if we talk more in kind of what's possible necessarily than what you're thinking about doing, maybe, what else is possible to learn or screen for when looking at the back of someone's eye?
I'll start with using a really popular quote that is attributed to many, including Da Vinci and Shakespeare, right? The eye is a window to the soul. And people said that because the eyes can reveal so much information about a person's emotional state. But it actually can reveal a lot about a person's health and general kind of just well-being. In the retina, it's the one place in the body that we can directly and non-invasively visualize arteries and veins and capillaries and nerves. So there is a ton of information, and it became quite a bit, I'll just say popularized, or I guess in 2018 with one of the early Google publications in the space, that there are a ton of biomarkers for not only ocular diseases like diabetic retinopathy and macular edema, but for cardiovascular, hypertension, neurological, neurodegenerative. It is really, really, it is truly the eye is the window into the body and health. So for identifeye, we are starting with a focus on caring for patients living with diabetes, because it's the unfortunate part that, 11.6% of the U.S. population is diabetic. That's 38 million people living with diabetes in the U.S. alone. It's over 500 million people in the world. So we're starting with diabetic retinopathy, screening, monitoring, and then naturally we are looking at hypertension and cardiovascular risk because of the association, comorbidities, et cetera. But obviously, I'm really truly excited about, again, launching our platform, starting, and then leveraging it to develop and deploy additional tests that can be accessible to patients. And because of the way that this is set up, and I go back to my comment with GRAIL and how excited I am about that test, our tests here don't have consumables. So it is easy to think of this can really be democratized, right? We can really help patients who need it most get access to care.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I guess, are you talking there about like the comparison to say like a chemical test or something like that might require consumables?
Exactly. I'm thinking of even like, a test like the gallery test, you take a whole tube of blood and you run the analysis, but that's a genomic test, or, it's a methylation assay that you have to run, or you go to your phlebotomist again, like for any other tests to measure your A1C, your cholesterol, et cetera, et cetera. So, right, like you have to do all of that physical process versus saying, I have your image, I'm going to ask the algorithm to give me a report.
Yeah, so it's a comment around scalability. It's a comment around, cost and resource. And so that's actually a comment about all of that stuff. So I guess you see this then, in fact, we can talk about your sort of go-to-market and what you're expecting initially from an initial sort of growth perspective. But then I also want to fast forward that, extrapolate that to you must be thinking quite global with this.
I definitely am, because I go back to we can really help a lot of people. But I also have worked in the space long enough to say, we also need to help with financial KPIs of wherever health system, et cetera, to actually survive as a company, make them actually make it available to their patients. So we're thinking about it hand in hand. But I also do believe that when you build true value and you do it in an approachable, tractable way, it is easier to do it. The reason we started with diabetic retinopathy screening is there is a reimbursement code. There's insurance coverage. I have a very clear path, both regulatory path and reimbursement, to actually deploy my system, deploy the first test. By the way, for those who don't have insurance, I'm trying to think, once identifeye starts standing on its feet and we're generating revenue and become beta positive, which is something that the investors really are excited about, is we can subsidize, right? The test itself, it's a very small component once I have placed the units out, et cetera. So, really, the sky is the limit, and I am really excited about the potential of the retina becoming sort of this non-invasive diagnostic platform that is accessible to people in sort of like our times.
Yeah, it was a really interesting point you made, by the way, that it's the only place in the body where we can directly look at an artery, a vein, and a nerve directly. I haven't really thought about that before, but yeah, you can literally look at, you get an ophthalmoscope out and all of a sudden you can literally visualize, you can actually directly look at all three. I haven't really considered that before. Whereabouts are you guys now then? Like, what are you sort of, what's next for you very practically? Like, what are you on the cusp of in terms of, where you are as a business and selling and all that sort of thing and growth? And, talk to me about that.
So we have different development paths for what we're calling the identifeye system, which is this AI-enabled, fully automated camera, versus the diabetic retinopathy screening algorithm. Because the first product, sort of, when we think about it fully end-to-end, that's going to be, we're calling it identifeye DR. And the way that works is, obviously, for the algorithm, we've done a lot of the development the way that traditionally people develop algorithms for classification, disease right classification. So we licensed a ton of images, like hundreds of thousands of images. We developed the algorithm. We've been tuning with images from our own cameras, but eventually we'll have to run a pivotal study that is part of our 510K submission, with our own camera that has been finished and it's in use, et cetera. So there's a little bit, we are working on finishing up the development of the algorithm and preparing for that last study. But that also does mean that we have finished the development of the identifeye system. And we have received an exemption from the FDA, which according to the FDA, it means that we can be exempt from a 510K before we combine it with the identifeye DR algorithm, which means that we can market the device when we are ready. And I will leave it at that.
So it's exciting times. It
is very exciting.
And in terms of what you guys sort of, I guess, need as a company then at the minute, so I imagine you're hiring. People on the cusp of this sort of thing must always be hiring, right? So, we have a lot of people listening to this podcast. So, who might you be hiring for? And, who do you want? Who do you need?
Yes, we're always hiring amazing people. We have a wonderful team. And obviously, as we are preparing to be a commercial organization, next stages, we have a handful of positions listed on our website, which is identifeye, replacing the Y with EYE, like the I, .health. Yes, and we have, again, our head of people is pretty incredible too. So if you see anything that is interesting, that's kind of what I tell people, please send a note because we do review everything and we will get back to you. And sometimes, and this is not just that identifeye, but this is advice I give to people. Sometimes you do the best you can to write a job description the way you think, is like at least addresses some of the current needs. But yeah. actually, like within a few months, I have never worked on the thing. Like, you know what I mean? It's like you never quite know when positions morph. And it's all about hiring amazing people who believe in the same values. They are inspired by the company mission and vision. So we're always looking for amazing people.
I completely agree. And actually, this is a point that I do actually want to pull out here, that I think this is true of most, if not all, people that run startups or even small businesses, to be perfectly honest, because even ours, we're an agency model, you know, we're not venture funded startup, but like, it's the same for us. We're just a small team that appreciates massively when someone fits in, that brings diversity of thought, but then also might just have some weird and wonderful skills and abilities that we never even thought about how they might be integrated, but all of a sudden can create an entire new function for us, or, you know, appeal to a certain job in a certain way, and they can build a team around them doing a certain thing, or like whatever it is. And so you're absolutely right. Like, I think just as a point for, there'll be lots of people listening to this podcast that I think want jobs in health tech, want jobs in health tech startups. And I think it's just a really, really, really important message to put out there. You've heard it here from Vicky, like, and this is, you know, an incredible startup with incredible founders doing incredible things. Like, you can just look at a job description and say, do you know what? I'm good for about 65, 70% of that. But I'll tell you what, I'm going to apply because this sounds right up my street. That team looks amazing. The website's bang on. I'm really passionate about it. And you know what? If you come up to interview, and I imagine it's the same for you, Vicky, but if you come to interview and you do say like, yeah, I'm probably good for about 75% of that, this is the 25% that I'd need a bit of learning and training on or support on. Or someone else can do that, like, but I can also bring this other thing, or whatever it is. But I think that is such a sensible, honest, and genuinely wonderful conversation to have with people, because I think that level of honesty and like even just like self-awareness to even just come up and say that stuff is just green flags left, right, and center. So yeah, a very good point, Vicky, and thank you for raising it. Listen, I know we're running out of time, but it's been an absolute pleasure having you on and hearing everything that you're up to. What a journey that you've had to this point. Like, it's incredible. Like, yeah, Barclay and everything that you've been doing, portable MRIs and T2 biosystems, and, you know, being part of wonderful teams, doing wonderful things, and seeing synergy like that and how you hire for it, and hearing obviously everything that you're doing with identifeye. And yeah, you're right. The eye is said by a few people, clearly the eye is the window to the soul for various reasons. And I think you're absolutely right. In a world where we are so focused now on creating scalable models, we're so focused on data, and we're so focused on non-invasive, you know, as I say, scalable ways to screen health and to make us all healthy. Like, it's only a matter of time, and it feels to me like you are certainly in the right place at the absolute right time. And yes, you might be starting with diabetic retinopathy, but clearly there are many wins to be had in cardiovascular health and neurological health, and yeah, and lots more I'm sure we'll discover. So Vicky, thank you. For those people that do want to learn more about identifeye, or that may want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do so?
First of all, again, this has been super fun, and I love sharing the story. It has been a really exciting journey. I love connecting with people. People should find me on LinkedIn. And then also look for us at our website for more information. They can submit, again, that's identifeye, spelled with EYE rather than Y, .health. Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.